should the government be involved in stimulating home sales or getting inventory back on the market? So Stephan is one of the most influential YouTubers when it comes to real estate and personal finance. And today we're going to be reacting to some of the opinions that he has had when it comes to the government and their proposals on how to make housing a bit more affordable to both sellers and buyers. So watch us as we react to what he has to say, and we'll give opinions on what that means for the Tampa market, the Hernando County area, and all the other things related to where we live. So James, are you a big Stephan fan?
Yeah, I watch a little bit here and there.
I've grown up on Stephan, watching him kind of come through, and a lot of his stuff is, I think, pretty good when it comes to like macro, big picture, right?
Yep.
And so he recently put out a video where he was talking about what President Biden was proposing in terms of like tax credits for sellers to try to get some of this inventory and people freed up. And we've made videos on this before, talking about how this high interest environment and people locked in low rates have people frozen in place.
Yep.
So I'm going to show you a few clips, and we're going to react and see whether we agree or what we think the consequence of some of these proposals would be. You ready for the first one?
Yep.
All right, let's go.
That would give first-time home buyers and starter home sellers a $10,000 tax credit, give developers an incentive to build and renovate more than 2 million homes, eliminate some of the red tape that comes along with mortgage costs, and push forward initiatives that would help lower the price of rent.
All right, so $10,000 tax credit to buyers, first time, just from the federal government. Do you think a tax credit is a good idea for both buyers and sellers to start freeing up some of this inventory? Do you think that even makes a difference?
So I think it's a good idea. Do I think that it makes a difference is where I get a little stuck. Like, I think that with tax credits, especially a first-time buyer, right? Like their education on wealth and finance probably isn't as high.
Right.
That I don't know that they'll understand it, right? I don't know if that'll give them an urge to take action. I think that might just end up being like, oh my God, look at my taxes this year by the time they get there, because they won't even remember it. But I think that we do need to figure out incentives inside of that. They said to sell homes too, right?
Right. And I have another clip for that, so we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. That piece there made a lot of sense. The question I had there is also like lowering mortgage costs. Are they associating the two, you think? Or
I think part of it is like, the fees associated with the transaction in general is what they're trying to kind of combat a little bit with this when it comes to, so you have a purchase price of $350, but when you're taking out a loan, it's not $350, right?
Yeah, so it'll kind of balance. Like you figure 3% in closing costs, which is roundabout, sometimes a little higher, but that on 300,000, 10 grand would pretty much wipe that out long term, because you got to wait till your tax return gets back.
Yeah, and the only other thing too I think about too is this. I believe the way they have it structured, and it might be in the next clip, is a $5,000 over 2 years.
Yep.
That doesn't really help long term. Because after those 2 years, then what?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, all right, let's take a look at this next one. All right.
And I don't see this as a way of driving viable demand during a time that we already have record low inventory. But we'll continue, because this goes on to the next part. In order to help bring more inventory onto the market, since sellers are locked into low interest rate mortgages, they also propose to give sellers a 1-year tax credit of up to $10,000 to middle-class families who sell their starter home to another owner-occupant. This means that for 88% of the country, homes under $350,000 would qualify. But again, the problem is threefold. One, these sellers are going to have to pay a higher mortgage rate when they become buyers on their next home. Two, they're probably going to have a much higher property tax basis, because guaranteed they're paying less than what the property is currently worth. And three, these sellers need to move somewhere, so without more available for sale, it's likely to be a wash in terms of adding inventory. This also might be difficult to stipulate that it's sold to an owner-occupant, because for many sellers who've been in their properties for decades, there's a lot of neglected maintenance and upkeep, so unless the future buyer wants to do a substantial amount of work and spend a lot of money, it might be sold to an investor, which would completely disallow the $10,000 tax credit. Again, to me, this seems great for people who are already planning to sell their home to begin with, but it's not enough to push a seller over the edge who's not really thinking about selling. Like, 10 grand is not going to be a good enough reason to prompt people to put their homes up on the market.
All right. So $10,000 seller credit. Now we know that in Hernando County that the median or average sale price is $323,000 right now. So on average, a good portion of our county would qualify for this.
Yep.
But Graham makes a point here on deferred maintenance. You know, a lot of these homes that at least I've shown, have you shown, I would imagine as well, have quite a bit of deferred maintenance to it, maybe not have been upgraded, maybe original, like 1980s, Spring Hills Notorious for 1980s homes, maybe haven't been upgraded, haven't been kept up. Investors do want to scoop them up. Like if you're a seller looking at this going, how do I, even if I were to, like he makes the point where the seller was going to sell anyway. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
That a seller was going to sell whether a 10,000 credit is going to make a difference.
That was not going to urge anybody to get off the fence and give up a low interest rate. I agree with everything that he said. It's not going to urge anybody to give up on that. It's not going to urge anybody to sell their home. And the truth is, a lot of people may not even be eligible for it because they're not owner occupants.
Right.
A lot of properties are being bought by rental companies, people who want to fix and flip. If you're lacking the upgrades that most people are looking for, kitchens, bathrooms, and then the standards, which is your HVAC and your roof, it makes it tough. So I agree with everything that he said inside of there.
Yeah. And so if you were to say like a tax credit, this $10,000 tax credit, there are proponents of it that would say, again, it is a government bailout or a government handout, right? Where are we getting this money from? Should the government be involved in stimulating home sales or getting inventory back on the market?
I don't think so. Yeah, no, I think that there's enough incentive there if people just educate themselves. I think that's the lacking is kind of what we're doing here, and I hope that other realtors start to do more of the same, and other financial advisors start to do more of the same. The backbone of owning a home is one of the leading charges to creating wealth, and I think that lack of education is what holds what would be first-time home buyers from doing it. Is they're fearful, they don't know the costs, they don't believe they can, they believe their interest rate's too low, and all of these things are holding them back from starting to create any kind of real net worth.
Okay, so let me ask this question, because I think this is one where we have to really think about, do we have a seller problem or a buyer problem in the market today?
Both. I'd go with both. I mean, if you're going to ask for which one is more of the problem right now, I believe that we're a little light on buyers.
Okay.
Our active inventory is up there. Now, if buyer demand went up, let's say 50%, I bet we're in a problem. I bet we're in a problem where not enough sellers are going to list their home. And that's going to be an interesting problem over the next couple of years because people with low interest rates don't want to give that up. And also, as great advisors in real estate, we're going to advise that those folks rent out their home instead of selling it, right? Is that an option that they have to continue to build wealth and have two appreciating assets? So my answer is both. I think in our current market where we are right now, the number one priority problem is we don't have enough buyers that are looking for homes right now.
Okay. So yeah, I would agree. I think that it's hard to say like one is more than the other, but I do think like when we're looking at like how do we solve and when we say we, nation, area, because it's difficult for any one individual to do anything that way, but we can forecast and predict and analyze and all of that. So here's another one when it comes to a down payment assistance and program. Again, I love Stephan, but he's very macro. Now he's going to talk about a program in Nevada, but we're going to talk about what we have here in Florida. So let's take a look at what he's talking about on down payment assistance.
And third, they're calling for down payment assistance. As they say, the president continues to call on Congress to provide up to $25,000 in down payment assistance to first-generation homebuyers whose families haven't benefited from the generational wealth building associated with homeownership. Now, before we go into some of the specifics, it's important to mention that down payment assistance is really nothing new, and there are plenty of programs that already exist. You just have to go and find them. For example, Nevada offers a $25,000 forgivable down payment to eligible homeowners purchasing a primary residence anywhere in rural Nevada. This is structured as a second loan with zero interest, no payments, and it's forgiven in 3 years, or on December 31st, 2026. This is also the same premise as the Down Payment Towards Equity Act of 2023, which was Joe Biden's revised proposal of his 2021 Down Payment Act. And as they say, to qualify, you must be a first-time home buyer, earn a lower moderate income consistent for the area, buy a home that'll be used as a primary residence, use a government-backed mortgage, and be a first-generation home buyer, have parents or legal guardians who defaulted on a home loan, or lived in foster care during their lifetime. And just like today's proposal, it'll include a down payment assistance of $25,000. However, since 2021, this has been sitting with Congress and not yet passed into a law. Although, like I said, down payment assistance already exists on a state level. Like, just look at California's Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loan. I know, what a name, right? Anyway, this is a program that was introduced a year ago that would give first-time home buyers a 20% down payment when they go and purchase a property. And after you close, the new buyer would eventually pay back the loan when they sold the house, plus 20% of profits. For example, if you go and buy a $500,000 home while borrowing $100,000 from this program, if the home is one day sold for $640,000, you'd pay back the original loan in addition to 20% of the profits, leaving you with whatever is left over. Well, guess what?
So, down payment assistance. Now, Graham's talking on a macro level. We have a lot of down payment assistance programs, but we have one notable one that's actually being renewed coming July, which is Hometown Heroes. And so, how much do you know, like, on the ins and outs of Hometown Heroes when it comes to, like, I know the program has been expanded, and so now it is really for all residents of Florida, and that was a change from the last time where it was for like first responders and nurses and things like that. Is that accurate?
My understanding of it is that it's for anyone in Florida who works for a Florida-based company. So basically, the company has an address inside of Florida, is my understanding of it. I always defer to a lender when it comes to these type of questions, but my understanding of the program is it works that way. So that's mostly everybody. That's a lot of people who are employed here in Florida. But I agree with what Graham was saying there. It comes back to us as realtors and communicating out to people that these programs exist. There's other ways to skin this. If you come to me and somebody comes to me and they have $0 out of pocket, we can analyze their situation and figure out if it's possible. Maybe we use a USDA loan, which is 0 down, and then we figure out how much the closing costs are and say that it's 3% in closing costs. We buy the house using the 0 down USDA, and then we ask for 3% in seller credit, and now there are 0 costs out of pocket. So each situation has to be reviewed, but even without down payment assistance, if the barrier for somebody is that I don't have the money to do it, I'm going to urge them to have a conversation with a professional, because we know how to accomplish that. And even without the down payment assistance, I agree 100% with what Graham said. My parallel to it is that as realtors, not just us sharing the word, which we're trying to, other agents need to come together. A lot of what the problems have become inside of real estate have come from our lack of articulation of what's available and how this process can work.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, last clip is his solution. Now, he has a pretty radical suggestion on how to solve the problem, which I think will make for some interesting conversation. Because when I first heard it, I was like, I think this might be interesting. You ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
But if we could find a way around this so that once people have a loan, they could take it with them on the next home, at least on a primary residence, it'll open up a lot of inventory. Second, they should allow you to take the tax basis with you. The fact is, homeowners are sitting on a ton of equity, and since those property values are typically tied to the value of the home when you purchase it, it can be very expensive to move. This entices a lot of people to stay and never sell, because by selling, they would be giving up the low property tax basis and would have to pay a lot more on the next one. If you get rid of this and allow people to take their property tax basis to the next one, it'll solve the problem entirely. 3. Reduce capital gains when you sell a property. I know this one is a bit unpopular, but it's true. There are so many homeowners out there who are sitting on record gains, and they don't want to sell because they don't want a portion of those proceeds to go to taxes, sometimes as high as 37%. Just imagine you bought a property in 1970 for $100,000, and now it's worth $3 million. Even with the $500,000 capital gain exclusion on a primary residence, if you lived in California, that is an $880,000 tax bill.
All right. Interesting concept. Being able to take your loan interest rate and balance with you. Do you agree or disagree that that would be beneficial to the market as a whole?
We're going into a realm here that I don't know enough information, right? So if you're asking me for the real estate market, for sellers to prompt to sell their home, to stimulate those same sellers to buy other homes, yes, I think that that's a no-brainer because of what percentage of the market has an interest rate well below where we are at today. The flip of it is what he said there, for the people who have investments in mortgage-backed securities. I don't know enough there of how it works, but the turnover of those securities being sold and then resold and then resold does have to do with the other side of the market, right? So like what happens to those bonds staying the same for longer? I don't know. Like, I don't know if you have any sense on that. I don't have any.
85% of all loans are backed by the government.
Okay.
So that's also deceptively said, where is like not FHA. I'm talking about 85% of loans are backed by the government, whether you know that or not.
Yep.
And so a lot of what banks do to free up capital is they take all these loans, bundle them, pack them together, and sell them as mortgage-backed securities to investors.
Yep.
Not gonna lie, I'm not worried about investors.
Okay.
I don't. Like, they're gonna figure out ways to make money. That's their problem. Let them figure that out. That's what Wall Street does, and sometimes they do it to the detriment of society.
I wonder if there's a lot of little things that come to mind. So like your lenders, like the active inventory for lenders basically goes down if you allow for that, because those people are not going to pull a new loan again. It's it's a shift. Like that's a major change in the economical system of buying a home, right? So I like it. I think that it makes logical sense. If you bought a home and you have a $250,000 loan balance and it's at 3.5%, it would be a huge reason to like that removes the barrier. It removes the constraint of why you won't sell to buy a house at 7%. So, and these are all before, I mean, always if we say interest rates on this, it's just us using examples. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. Like, I don't know that anybody will ever act on it because of all the unhappy people that it would make on the other side of the equation. I think for the homeowner, it'd be a great move.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no matter what, when there's such a spread, and we did this in our last video, that the spread between the average that the person is locked in at, which is about 4%, and the current level, which is about 7%, which by historical standards is actually average. What's not average is the price of the homes. But interest rate, historically, it's not out of this world in relation to the historical averages of interest rates.
Yeah.
So you have to close that gap in order to free up inventory. So now you either have one of two things happen. Interest rates will come down, and when the Federal Reserve doesn't directly impact it, but it kind of goes in line with, if they cut rates, then other rates will cut and things like that. But if they do a 25 basis point cut, which is like nothing, 0.25%,
not going to move.
How many of those would they even need? Over how long a period of time would it take to then start freeing up this inventory? And what I think is happening is that right now that these homes have appreciated in value, and now people's families are growing, life is changing, but because of where they're going to go, maybe it's out of state, maybe it's somewhere else, they can't do the step up to where they need to. So now these homes have higher homeowners insurance, higher taxes potentially. There's going to be more deferred maintenance, right? So now this deferred maintenance, you're going to pay for it at the end when you go to sell it, because now you have to take this deferred maintenance into consideration. So if you haven't changed your roof, if you haven't upgraded any appliances, if you haven't upgraded any of this other stuff, so you're still going to have the effects of this over the long term. And so if nothing happens, it could be a few years before the rates get to a point where sellers are motivated again to make a change.
So something I want to add to that is, for anybody who does have deferred maintenance and there's an option not to have deferred maintenance, depending on the level of deferred maintenance, it's not just the cost of the repairs. It's the extra 25% that an investor is going to want to make. Deferred maintenance is a huge hit on people's equity, and I don't think that we talk about it enough, but there are options when they do go to list things like Curbio.
What's that?
Curbio is a great product that basically they have a team of contractors. They'll come out, they'll quote what it would be to update your house, and you can do virtually anything, right? You can do paint, you can do kitchen, you can do a roof, you can do whatever it is. And then Curbio fronts it for that work to get done, and then they get paid out of the closing with their premium on it. But that premium is typically going to be less than what you would lose to an investor. Right. So just a way of improving the home before you list. But I think it is a real problem just going back to it. And I don't know what the answer is. I think that interest rates getting to where they got to was not a good move on a whole. All right. Like, I think it's great for homeowners. It's great for me as a real estate agent being able to perform more business because more people come off the shelf. Right.
Right.
But when I look at the problem for on a whole in the economy, I think interest rates getting below 4.5 is just not a great idea. Yeah. Me personally, I think it's not good for the economy. It puts a lot of lenders and banks in a bad situation where they can't sell. What are they called? Where they have it, and basically the mortgage-backed securities.
Mortgage-backed securities.
So they have it, and why in the world would you want to buy that if you can buy one with a higher yield because the interest rates are higher?
Right.
So that's kind of what happened to Silicon Valley Bank, and just for my dumbed down version of it, makes logical sense. Like, if you have an investment that pays a lower yield, you can't sell it if there's something that's readily available that pays a higher yield. So I think interest rates should stay above 4.5%. I'm not going to be making these decisions, but that's my ultimate gut. And but I also think they need to get down to 5 before the people who are at 3 would consider selling.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you like this video, obviously give it a thumbs up, please. Comment, let us know. Obviously, taking somebody who's got a big audience and platform and just kind of bouncing a few thoughts back and forth, I think makes a lot of sense because the perspective is we're very localized, but it's a national real estate conversation that should be happening in the best interests of buyers and sellers, so that the market doesn't freeze up and lock up, because I think that'll be terrible. Not because I'm an agent, but because it would just be terrible for the economy that it gets frozen in place because nobody's incentivized to do anything. Not to their own detriment, at least. And so, we'll take a look at a couple other perspectives in the coming weeks, but help us join the conversation. What do you like if you're watching this and you got this far? What do you think would help free up inventory and get the market moving in a healthy manner again? So comment below, let us know what you think, and we'll see you in the next video.